Chapter 390 For he knows. Gua. Aaron's eyes shot wide open. Clenching onto his heart, Aaron started hyperventilating. He kept breathing, but with each breath he took he felt this overwhelming sense of death wash over him. Only after taking a couple more breaths did Aaron finally calm down a little. What happened to me? He looked beneath him, his bedsheets were soaked in his own sweat. Touching his forehead, Aaron wiped his forehead which was dripping with sweat. Faint memories started to surface inside of his mind as his face paled considerably. Ugh. Clenching onto his head and letting out a groan, Aaron lifted his head and looked around him. Wooden floor, white walls, and a white ceiling. He was in his own residence. His hyperventilation did not stop as he bit his lips till his lips bled. His body shook all over. Hugging his body, he repeatedly muttered, "Spare me." He could feel this vivid sense of pain course through his whole body. He just wanted it to stop. What is this smell? Sniffing around, Aaron suddenly smelled a strong and pungent smell, reminiscent of that of alcohol. Lowering his head, he pulled his shirt and smelled it. "It's coming from me," he mumbled underneath his breath. When he realized this, he pulled himself off his bed and moved straight to the mirror. He stumbled a couple of times, but it wasn't long before he stood face to face with the mirror. "I'm still okay?" Aaron muttered, touching his face and body all over. Though faint, images of different scenarios propped up inside of his mind. Recalling them, his body trembled all over. It felt so vivid. As though he had truly experienced it. Even now he couldn't quite get rid of the sense he had experienced. It was just a dream, just a dream. I must have drank too much, he's dead for sure. Aaron repeatedly muttered as he stared at himself in the mirror. It had to be that. The smell of alcohol in the room and the fact that he was still all right were testaments to that. Also, the fact that the person responsible for torturing him was someone who was supposed to be dead. Aaron realized that there were simply too many holes in his dreams to make it seem that what had happened had truly happened. He laughed. Haha, it must have been a bad dream. His laugh was forced, but he was merely trying his best to remain composed. Although he had no idea about what happened at the party, he was planning on checking later to make sure it really was a dream. Phew. But just as Aaron had calmed down, and he had managed to convince himself that everything that had happened last night was merely a dream that came as a result of him getting too drunk, from the corner of his eyes, he caught a glimpse of a small letter by the side of his desk. What's this? An ominous feeling washed over him as he laid eyes on the letter. Whew. Taking another deep breath to calm his nerves down, Aaron slowly walked toward the letter. Extending his hand which was trembling, he slowly unfurled the letter. Phew. Aaron breathed a sigh of relief. Reading through the contents of the letter, he realized that it was just a long list of rules regarding the upcoming competition. Sitting back down on his bed, he let out another deep breath. I need to stop drinking. Ever since waking up, he felt paranoid about everything. Just the slightest thing startled him. Ugh. A sharp pain coursed through the right side of Aaron's head, prompting him to flinch slightly. Fortunately, the pain only lasted for a brief moment. Scratching the area that hurt, he muttered. Strange. Why does the side of my head hurt? Thump. Dropping a large dumbbell onto the ground, I took a white towel from the side and wiped the sweat from my face. He's probably forgotten about everything that has happened. About 2 days had passed since the incident. The one where I tortured Aaron. At the moment, Aaron was probably thinking something along the lines of, everything I went through is a dream or some bullshit like this. This was exactly what I wanted him to think. The torture was merely something for my own self-satisfaction. I had other plans for him. With the aid of Douglas and the others, we were able to somewhat create enough alibis and evidence to make it seem that he really had been drunk and everything was just a drink. You're early. Currently, I was in a private training room near my residence. This was a small perk I got thanks to the dwarves. From about 100 meters away, Amanda's voice rang out. Looking at her, I nodded. Yeah, I'm used to it. Since the training room was massive and it was at my disposal, I told the others that they could use it whenever they wanted. Naturally, everyone took me on my offer. Well, everyone except Melissa, who did not want to have anything to do with training. You look quite tired. Well, the dumbbells are pretty heavy. In order to get used to the mass-changing properties of my sword, I had to resort to this kind of muscle training. If not for this, even if I used the keiki style and increased the mass of the sword halfway through my swing, By the time I was done with my movements, my sword would just drop to the ground and an opening would appear. How heavy? About 500 kilograms? That much. Well, anything lower would not work. Amanda nodded her head. Extending her hand, she took out her bow. Wearing her training gear, Amanda had a small hairband on her mouth as she gathered her hair behind her in a ponytail, revealing her slender neck. I see, should we do the usual? Yeah. This was actually not the first time that Amanda and I met up. It was probably the fourth time by now. I was a bit surprised the first time, turns out we both trained at the same time. For her, this was the routine she was used to ever since taking over the guild in her father's stead. Apparently, she had to train very early since her days were usually very busy with guild-related stuff. For me, it was more of a habit I developed when training in the wilderness back in Henler. Either way, this was good for me. Training with someone else was a lot more efficient than just training alone. Plus, there were a lot of things that I wanted to ask of her. Especially regarding Nola and my parents. Raising her bow and aiming it at me, Amanda's soft voice rang out. Are you ready? Taking a deep breath, extending both of my hands forward, I channeled the wind scions inside of my body until a green hue shrouded my body. Right now, Amanda was helping me train my reflexes and agility. One thing that I noticed was that one of my lacking aspects was my agility. Not only that, but long-ranged opponents were especially hard for me to deal with. Amanda was a big help to me. Ready? Okay, I'm starting. Amanda released the string of her bow. A translucent blue streak of light shot out from her bow. Following the first shot, Amanda extended her hand again and pulled the string again before releasing it. Not even a second after she shot her first arrow, 2 more arrows shot out, and following this more and more quickly headed in my direction. It wasn't long before a wall made of blue streaks appeared in front of me. Staring at them from the distance, my face turned serious. This is going to be tough. I had set a couple of handicaps on myself for this training. I wasn't allowed to use any skill or any manuals apart from the full body one. Since my goal was training my agility, this was the most appropriate choice. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Cutting through the air like missiles, the arrows soon materialized in front of me. Gently pressing my foot onto the ground, I took a step back. Shoo. An arrow brushed past the side of my cheek. Following that arrow, 2 more arrows arrived in my vicinity. Moving my hands in front of me, twisting my heel, I swiftly grabbed the bodies of the arrows, disrupting their momentum. Then after the arrows lost their momentum, I dropped them to the ground and did the same thing for the next few arrows. Weaving through the endless amount of arrows, sweat started to accumulate on my forehead as I found my body progressively getting more and more tired with each passing second. But that wasn't the only thing I was feeling. I could vividly feel myself getting better and better at moving in tight spaces. Excitement flashed across my eyes as I continued to dodge the arrows. It wasn't long before I started to get used to the rhythm and I started to feel at ease dodging the arrows. Shoo, shoo. Dodging a couple of more arrows, I looked up to Amanda. A smirk appeared on my lips. That the best you can do? Staring back at me, Amanda's hand trembled slightly. Her brows knit as a result of my provocation. I'm getting bored, her. Shoo. Before I could even finish my words, a blue streak of light suddenly rushed in my direction at a speed at least 5 times faster than the previous arrows. Caught off guard, my brows jumped up. Wait, UK. But it was too late. Before I could even react, the arrow directly hit me in my right thigh. The force behind the arrows was so strong that I was forced to take a step back. Fortunately, all the arrows that Amanda shot were blunt, else I would have been in serious trouble. Still, it hurt quite a lot. Shoo, shoo, shoo. The sound of the wind being split rang from above and my eyes trembled. Raising my head, much to my horror, I found over a dozen similar arrows headed in my direction. Hey, stop. Stop. You win. Covering my body with my arms, I squirmed in pain as a dozen arrows crashed against my body at terrifying speeds. Shoo, shoo. I said stop, but it seemed as though Amanda couldn't hear me as she continued to shoot the arrows in my direction. Turning my head in her direction, it was then that I finally noticed the edges of her lips were finally curled upwards. You're doing this on purpose. I shouted. Shoo. Ugh. Another arrow shot, hitting directly in the ribs. A pained groan escaped from my mouth and I dropped to the ground. Fortunately, once Amanda saw that I was on the ground, she finally stopped. Glaring at her, I raised my hands in defeat. You win, I give up. Approaching my location, Amanda's face remained stoic. But from the way she was skipping toward me, resulting in her ponytail to jump up and down behind her, I could tell that she was proud of her achievement. I ground my teeth as a result. "You happy?" "About what?" Amanda replied, feigning ignorance. I rolled my eyes. Amanda had changed a lot ever since I had last seen her. She had gotten a lot cheekier. Whatever. Shaking my head, I sighed. If there was anyone I had to blame, it had to be me. Why did I have to go on and provoke her? Dumb move. Raising my head and staring at Amanda, who was standing near me, I muttered. I think you've gotten a low. Twang. Twang. Before I could finish my sentence, my communication device vibrated. Who's trying to talk to me? Tilting my head, I took out my communication device and checked who the sender was. Surprise flashed across my face as I realized that the sender was none other than Melissa. Even more surprising was her message. "We need to talk." Reading it, uneasiness washed over me. Just what did she mean by this? Chapter 395, He Knows. Raising my head, a large white building appeared in my vision. The building was located on the outer side of the city, and it was where the other humans resided. "Is this the place?" "Yes." Amanda's soft voice rang from next to me. She was currently accompanying me to the place. I wasn't the only one that was called, as Amanda received a similar message not long after. Since both of us received the same message, I already had an idea about what Melissa wanted to talk about. It was just a hunch, however. I could have been wrong. "What do you think Melissa called us for?" Touching her chin, Amanda thought for a moment before she shook her head. "Unsure. Guess we'll find out when we meet her." Walking up the stairs of the residence, we soon paused in front of a certain door. Looking around to make sure that no one was present, I pointed at the door. "This is the one, right?" Lowering her head and staring at her communication device, Amanda nodded. "Yes." "Okay." Raising my hand, I knocked on the door. If Melissa had to describe her relationship with her father in one word, it would be terrible. She wasn't mistreated or anything of the sort, but her father was someone who always strived to be the best. He was someone that was not satisfied with being second. He was also someone that desired for his children to be the best. Melissa was never interested in such matters ever since young. She only cared about her research and nothing else. As such, because of their clashing personalities, they never got along. Their relationship wasn't anything complicated, it was just that. But it was enough to create a distance between the two. What a troubling matter. Leaning back on her chair, Melissa stared at the ceiling. Thinking back to what happened a couple of nights ago, she took out a potion from her dimensional space and stared at it. Should I? Or should I not? She was tempted to try the potion, but after staring at it for a few seconds, she deeply sighed. Better not. If I take too many, I'll end up going crazy. Honestly, she was quite addicted to the potions by now. Having taken so many of them, it was almost like a routine for her. It was so bad that she would get withdrawal symptoms when she skipped a day. She knew she had to stop. Putting the potion away, her brows furrowed not long after as she turned to look at the door. Do they think I have all the time in the world for them? Just what is taking them so long? Standing up, Melissa checked her watch. Tisk. They were at least a couple of minutes late. Finally. Fortunately, she didn't have to wait for long as someone soon knocked on the door. Fixing her glasses, Melissa headed for the door and opened it. Took you too long enough. Standing opposite her was Amanda and Run under disguise. Sorry for the intrusion. Before Melissa could fully open the door, barging into the place as though it was his home, Run gave an empty apology to Melissa and sat down on the chair she was previously sitting on. Turning his head and glancing in her direction, he casually said, "So, what did you want to talk about?" Following him, Amanda also entered and sat in another seat. Melissa's brows twitched. She then took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Maybe I really should have taken the potion. Regret had started to kick in. Not even a minute had passed since she talked to him, and she was already on the verge of losing it. Taking another deep breath, Melissa closed the door behind her, albeit a bit forcefully. Then she sat down next to Amanda. Once she did, Rin spoke up again. "What did you want to talk about? I'm sure someone as busy as you wouldn't call us for nothing." There was sarcasm hidden within his voice. One that Melissa was all too familiar with. "You're right." Melissa nodded before mumbling something underneath her breath. I'd rather die of suffocation than do this. What did you say? But it appeared as though Ren had somehow managed to hear her words. Ignoring him, Melissa leaned back on her chair with a solemn look. I'll get straight to the point. My father knows. Knows. Wariness flashed across Ren's face. Sitting up straight, he leaned forward. What does he know? Extending her hand, Melissa took a few cards from her dimensional space and slapped them on the table. He knows about the magic cards. For more, visit emptynovel.com. He what? Contrary to the reaction she expected him to have, Ren only tilted his head. Melissa pointed at the cards on the table. Do you not get me? I'm saying that he knows about them. You're talking about your father, right? Who else would I be talking about? Oh. Ren's shoulders relaxed as he leaned back on his chair. On the other hand, Amanda's eyes were fixed on the cards at the table. Her brows twitched slightly. Why is he not surprised? Melissa looked stultified by Ren's reaction. Her brows jumped up slightly. Did he perhaps not know just who her father was? Maybe that was it. Just to make sure, she asked Ren in a clear and slow voice. You do know who my father is, right? Octavius Hall, #1 ranked hero. Ren's reply came as soon as her words ended. Surprise flashed across Melissa's face. If you know, why aren't you worried? Did he ask you to give him the cards? No. Melissa shook her head. So far he only mentioned it as a passing matter. But that was worrying enough. If he truly wanted to get his hands on the magic cards, things would get really troublesome. Then what's the problem? But it was clear that Ren didn't think the same way as he stood up in a relaxed manner. Lowering his head, his eyes paused on the cards at the table. They were currently neatly piled up together. Courtesy of Amanda, who sorted them out while she was talking to Ren. Melissa didn't put much thought into it. Amanda had minor OCD, so she had seen her do similar things back at the lock. On the other hand, lowering his hand and picking one of the cards up, Ren curiously studied the card in his hand before asking, Can I try this? No. Melissa's blunt reply came immediately. She then pointed at the door of the room. If you want to try it, do it outside, not in my room. If he activated the magic card now, the whole room would end up going in flames. Melissa had a lot of valuable stuff in the room. She wasn't too keen on having it all destroyed. Tisk. Ren clicked his tongue, prompting Melissa's brows to twitch. You've got a problem with my arrangements? Nope. Shrugging his shoulders, Ren headed for the door. Staring at his back from her seat, Melissa took out a potion and chugged it. In the end, she couldn't resist the temptation and finally gave in. Gulp. Chugging the potion down, her emotions instantly calmed down. Standing up, she followed Ren. So far, I've managed to create 3 grades of magic cards. Not sure about their naming, but the last grade has a power equivalent to a rank attack. That's kind of weak. Ren commented. Stopping in front of the door, he pulled the handle back and opened it. I'm the only one working on this project. What do you expect? Melissa retorted. She could have hired more people to help her with the magic card development, but since she wanted to hide the news from her father, she chose to do it by herself. Even if she had them under a mana contract, the more people that knew, the higher the chances of her father finding out became. In the end, it was all for naught. It turned out that her father still found out. Sigh, whatever. Just go out and try them. I've encrypted 4 different magic circles on the card. Choose whichever one you want. Sure. Exiting the room, Melissa followed him out. Amanda also quietly followed from behind. Melissa could see keen interest in her eyes as she followed after. Bang. Not even a couple of steps out of Melissa's room and I heard a bang come from below the residence. Curious, I moved towards the wooden handrail and looked below. What is he doing here? Surprise flashed across my eyes as I spotted a familiar figure standing below. Dust and smoke rose in the air, masking most of his features. But from the way he was holding onto his shield and his body size, the guy standing beneath was definitely Hein. What happened to him? I wondered to myself as my brows knit in thought. He had his own residence, what did he have to come here for? What are you doing here? A deep voice reverberated, following which a tall and muscular figure walked out from the dust. He looked quite familiar, but I wasn't able to recognize him instantly. John Burson. Thankfully, Amanda recognized him. Turning her head to look at me, she explained. Currently ranked, he was one of the exchange students that came in the first year. At the moment he seems to be an extremely promising candidate for the next rank tanker-type hero. Oh. I now finally realized who the person was. It was the same guy that beat Hein back at the tournament. Leaning on the handrail I chose to observe. What are you doing here? I know for sure you were not one of the 500 people selected to come to the conference. His deep and loud voice attracted the attention of the other residents. One by one a small crowd formed. Not minding the crowd, John continued. Since you aren't one of the people on the list, you must have somehow managed to sneak in. That's kind of stupid. There was no way one could have sneaked in. In order to make sure there was no one from the monolith, the Union strictly checked everyone going in and also made sure to only teleport 500 people. It was impossible to have another person. Wait, I didn't sneak in. Hein finally spoke, trying to defend himself. Then why are you here? That. A complicated look flashed across Hein's face. He looked unsure of how to answer. So, you can't even answer that. A burst of mana suddenly sprang out of John's body. Since you can't answer, I'll. Before John could finish speaking, having enjoyed enough of the show, I finally spoke up. I brought him here. Instantly everyone's attention was drawn to me. Since I was wearing a mask, I honestly didn't mind the attention. Turning his head, the mana inside of John's body faltered. Squinting, his eyes met with mine. Who are you? You don't need to know that. I pointed my hand at Hein. Let him go for now. If he had truly sneaked in, you think the elves wouldn't have noticed? What do you know? John frowned at my words. I face-bombed at his reaction. Turning my head, I looked at Melissa. Flashing the cards in my hand, I decided to ask a question. I'm allowed to use this, right? Surprise flashed across her face for a brief moment of time. It wasn't long before an innocent smile appeared on her face. I've always tested the card on robots. I never tried it against a human. Her innocent smile suddenly looked a lot more devilish. A cold chill ran down my spine. I'm actually quite curious about its effects. Chapter 396. Testing. Hue up. Jumping down from the building and softly landing on the ground, I walked over to Hein. You okay? Yeah. He replied, his eyes darting all over the shield. My brows furrowed at his actions. What's wrong? Nothing. Taking out a handkerchief, he slowly wiped away the dirt that was on his shield. A sigh escaped from my lips once I saw this. Ever since Hendler, he had always been acting up like that whenever his shield got dirty. I didn't even know how to react at this point. That aside, apart from minor dust on his body and shield, he truly did look fine. We'll talk more later. For now, step back. Why? Cutting him off, I extended my hand and turned my head. Don't worry, I'm only borrowing him. You can fight him later. My goal was to test the magic cards. I wasn't going to kill him. Hein could easily fight against him in the future. Plus, at the moment John was still stronger than Hein by one minor rank. Fine. What I said seemed to have some effect on Hein, who eventually stepped back. I nodded in satisfaction. Looks like he still had some respect for me. You still didn't answer me, who are you? John's voice rang from behind as a powerful wave of mana sprung from his body. Ignoring him, lowering my head, I stared at the cards in my hand. Fireball, Ice Wall, Quake and Blind. They were the spells encrypted in the magic cards. They were quite the simple spells, but they were still quite powerful. At least they were powerful enough to deal with the person in front of me. The reason why Melissa chose to encrypt these spells was because the others were just too complicated for her current level of development. Lifting my head and staring at the place which was surrounded by people, I looked back at John. Looks like a big crowd has formed around us. That's good. John lowered his body and took out his shield. He took a stance that looked similar to that of Hein. But if I had to say, it was a bit more refined. Not sure if it was a bit more efficient though. I'll keep you in check until the others come. See how you can explain the fact that you are here despite not being one of the people participating. I rolled my eyes at his words. Honestly, if I explained to him properly, I could resolve this whole conflict, but why would I? Had the perfect testing material right in front of me. Why would I miss such a good opportunity? Turning my head, I looked at Hein and softly muttered. Pay close attention. Bang. Then pressing my foot onto the ground, I shot in John's direction. Within a couple of seconds, I was already before him. Hue up. Reacting to my sudden burst of speed, taking a step forward, the ground beneath John cracked apart and small pieces of rock shot upwards. Dodging the pieces of rock, I swiftly arrived before him. As I arrived before me, in my view all I saw was a massive shield. It looked as though I was facing a massive tortoise. Quite frankly, despite my experience, I saw no openings. Still, I wasn't disheartened by this. Let's see. Taking out the fireball magic card, I channeled my mana into it. Then, turning my body sideways, I skid before the shield and smacked the card right on it. Smack. Since I didn't want him to notice that I had attached the card to his shield, I put quite a bit of force into my attack. The moment my hand smacked against the shield, a circular pressurized wind gale outwardly shot from the contact point between my hand and the shield. Swish. As a result, the ground around us bent down. Then, pressing my foot on the shield, I jumped up and did a backflip, distancing myself from him. Was that it? Once I distanced myself from him, lowering his shield, John looked at me. Confusion flashed across his face. Was that the strength of your attack? He once again questioned. The edges of his lips tugged upwards. Without saying anything, I touched my chin. Is one enough? From what Melissa told me, it would take 1.5 seconds to activate the card. However, if I wanted to, I could also delay the activation of the card by 10 more seconds by channeling my mana inside of a specific area that would delay the flow. This was a feature that I suggested to her a while back and the one that I wanted to test out. Glad she listened. Try attacking again. John taunted. Ignoring his taunts, I took out another magic card and once again dashed in his direction. The speed at which I was going was the same as before. Bang. Right as I arrived before the shield, stomping my left foot on the ground, my body shot toward the right side and I once again smacked a card on his shield. Smack. Another powerful wind gale shot out between the point of contact between my hand and the shield. Despite this, John remained unmoved. I think 2 is enough. Distancing myself away from John once again, I stopped. Since the time limit was only 10 seconds, there wasn't enough time to add a third one. But considering my opponent's strength, this was enough. Are you done playing around? Standing upright, John halted his steps. Furrowing his brows tightly, he glared in my direction. I don't know what you just did. I'd be careful if I were you. Shua. Before he could even finish his sentence, his shield glowed and a bright flame suddenly erupted, enveloping his body completely. He didn't even have enough time to scream before his whole body was entrapped by the flames. Actually, though faint, I could hear a small scream coming out from his lips. Oh shit. As seconds ticked and the flames engulfing John grew, my eyes opened wide. The flames were a lot stronger than I had originally thought. Turning my head in Melissa's direction, I found her looking at John's burning body with excitement. With a notepad in front of her, she scribbled a bunch of stuff on it. Next to her, Amanda had a helpless expression on her face. Turning her head, our eyes met and I shrugged. What did I expect? What's going on here? It was then that a familiar voice suddenly sounded. Turning my head, I spotted a familiar figure rushing in our direction. Long black hair, amethyst color hair, it was Donna. Swish. Appearing right before John, Donna waved her hand and the flames engulfing his body completely disappeared. H. Once the flames disappeared, John knelt down on the ground. His breathing was extremely rough and a part of his hair was burnt. Fortunately, that was the extent of his injuries. I sighed in relief once I saw that. Fortunately, he specialized in defense. Had he truly been heavily injured, I would have found myself in a bit of trouble. It wouldn't be to the extent of me getting kicked out by the union or anything like that, but it would still be bothersome. Did you do this? Snapping me out of my thoughts was an airy voice. Turning my head, my eyes interlocked with Donna's. She had an icy glare on her face as she looked at me. Gulp. Stared at by Donna, I swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She may have not been releasing any pressure, but the aura that her body gave off was no joke. It felt suffocating to say the least. Fortunately, it wasn't anything too bad. Having been close to ranks before, the pressure she gave out wasn't anything I wasn't used to as I quickly regained my composure. Guess I have no choice. Whew. Taking a deep breath and lowering my head, I muttered inside of my mind. Monarch's indifference. The tournament was coming up in a couple of days and Donna was supposed to give a roundup to the participants about who their opponents were and how the structure of the tournament worked. But just as she was about to arrive at the residence, she suddenly saw a bright flame in the distance. Though faint, she could also hear a muffled scream. Without hesitation, she dashed in the direction of where the noise came from. Once she arrived, it was then that she saw two males fighting against each other. One seemed to be fine, while the other was completely engulfed in powerful flames. Without hesitation, she raised her hand and quickly removed the flames away from the individual's body. Thankfully, the flames quickly dissipated away, revealing the features of a young man close to his 20s. John Burson. Donna instantly recognized him. He was one of the few people she paid close attention to due to his outstanding talent. Once she made sure that he was okay, she turned to face the perpetrator of the incident. Her brows instantly knit as soon as her eyes laid on him. I've never seen him before. Donna had memorized the faces of all the 500 participants, and yet the face before her was not someone on that list. Instantly she became warier. Who are you? She asked whilst secretly channeling the mana inside of her body, ready to be utilized at a moment's notice. You don't need to know. Opening his mouth, a cold and emotionless voice rang through the air. Donna's eyes suddenly opened slightly. That look, it felt familiar. Cold eyes and an emotionless voice. She remembered seeing a similar look in the past. The mana around her body faltered slightly. Calming down, she took a closer look at him. He had blonde hair and green eyes. He didn't look particularly handsome, but he was still attractive in his own right. Moreover, he looked to be in his mid-20s. He didn't look like anyone she knew, yet the aura he currently gave off was oddly familiar, yet at the same time it wasn't. She couldn't quite tell since he was hiding his aura, but Donna could tell that the male in front of her was strong. Maybe not as strong as her, but compared to John he was on a whole different level. He also doesn't seem to be wearing a skin mask. This was another thing she noticed. Had he been wearing a skin mask, Donna would have been able to tell with a quick glimpse, but he wasn't, meaning that he truly was someone she had never met before. But that made things even stranger. How could someone as talented as him go unnoticed for so long? Something just didn't add up. Calming down, she asked. I've never seen you on the list of people that should be here. I just want to know what you're doing here. He was being harassed, so I helped him out. Turning around, he pointed toward another youth in the distance. Sitting down on the grass in the distance, another blonde male appeared. He appeared to be wiping his shield. Donna was once again taken aback. I've also never seen him before. Her brows knit even more tightly. Two individuals that she had never seen before. Something was oddly wrong with the situation. Turning her attention back towards the main blonde male, Donna channeled her mana into her eyes. Let me get a look at who you truly are. Since he wasn't planning on revealing who he was, Donna was planning on using her powers to find out. Normally she wouldn't have done this, but since this concerned the fate of humanity, she had no other choice but to. We're with the humans that come from Henler. But before Donna could even use her power, as though he knew about what she was going to do, the blonde male spoke up. Instantly the glow in Donna's eyes receded. The humans from Henler? Isn't that the dwarven city? It is. A sudden look of understanding flashed across Donna's eyes. Oh, that's right, Monica did tell me that Douglas was there. But why is someone as young as him coming from there too? Donna didn't know much about the dwarven situation, but she was still a bit skeptical. She knew that the mission was something that required Douglas's assistance. But why would two people as young as them also go? Something didn't add up to her. Okay, for now, I want you guys to stay here so that I can... Donna, it's fine. I can confirm for them. Cutting her off, a familiar high-pitched voice rang from the distance. Donna instantly recognized the voice. Monica? Calmly nodding her head with her hands behind her back, Monica stopped right in front of the blonde male. Leaning her body forward, the corners of her lips curled upwards before she patted him on the shoulder lightly. Throughout the whole exchange, the blonde youth remained indifferent. This guy over here is in fact our little junior. Turning her head to look at Donna, Monica smiled even more brightly. A very talented one at that. Chapter 397, Dream or Reality. Junior? What are you talking about, Monica? Oh God. At Monica's arrival, the effects of Monarch's indifference wore off. My goal was to prevent Donna from using her skill to make me talk. With Monica here, the chances of that happening were almost null to zero, and thus Monarch's indifference wore off. Walking around me, a look of mischief appeared on Monica's face. What is she planning? Wariness flashed across my eyes. With her hands behind her back, Monica twirled around and whistled. Well, at least tried to. Wasted effort on her part as it just sounded like she was blowing air. She quickly gave up after a couple of tries. She then arrived next to Donna and reassured her. Anyways, as I was saying, you don't have to worry about these two. If you say so. Donna nodded her head with a confused look on her face. It was clear that she was still taken aback by the news. But since Monica was the one telling her the news, she merely went along with it. So, is everything sorted? Turning her head, Donna looked at John, who was slowly standing up. Although he was injured, it wasn't that bad. Brushing her hair by the side of her ear, she sighed. Since he's fine, I guess everything is all right. All right. I proceeded to walk up to John. The moment I did, Donna's voice rang from behind. What are you doing? I'm just getting my stuff back. Bending over, I picked up the 2 magic cards that I used. They were still intact, but compared to the first time I used them, they shined less. What are those? Wow. Observing the cards, Monica's voice suddenly rang in front of me, startling me. Leaning forward, she curiously looked at the card in my hand. Is this what you used to beat him? She extended her hand, trying to touch the card. Moving my hand away, I glared at her. Hands off. What? This is off limit. You'll know more about it later. Tisk. Monica clicked her tongue and crossed her arms. Fortunately, Monica was reasonable enough to stop. After all, there was still a crowd of people around us. Stingy. She muttered under her breath. Rolling my eyes, I nudged my head in Hein's direction. Hein, let's go. Lifting his head, Hein put his handkerchief away. Leaning sideways to make sure there were no smudges on his shield, only once he was sure it was shining did he finally stand up and nod his head. All right. I've got to have a talk with Malval about this. It's getting out of hand. If you would excuse me. Nodding my head in Donna's and Monica's direction, I headed back upstairs under everyone's watch. As I walked up, I could feel Donna's eyes burn holes at the back of my head, but I promptly ignore it. She'll probably figure it out soon. Not like I was trying to hide it. The only reason why I was still wearing a mask was because quite a few people knew of my face, and the matter regarding 876 wasn't resolved yet. Of course, I had plans regarding that matter. Walking up the stairs, it wasn't long before I stopped in front of Melissa's residence. Stopping in front of her, I proceeded to hand the cards back to her. Here, they are not bad. Keep them. But raising her hand, Melissa passed the cards back to me. Surprise flashed across my face. When did you suddenly become so generous? Melissa's face scrunched up at my words. Now why would you think I would want something you touched? Understanding flashed across my face. Figured. So I quickly retorted back. Couldn't have her out petty me. Why wouldn't you? Didn't you see my body? Yeah, bleached my eyes after I returned home. Tisk. I clicked my tongue. From the corner of my eyes, I could see Amanda covering her eyes with her hand. Understandable. Guess even she couldn't handle Melissa's pettiness. Anyways, keep the cards. I've got plenty of them. Well, if you say so. I put the cards back in my dimensional space. They may end up being useful in the future. Actually, I still needed to properly test the cards. John didn't turn out to be that good of a punching bag. It only took 2 cards to take him down. Was kind of disappointed. From his display, I could tell Hein was more skilled. While in thought, flipping through her small notepad, Melissa headed back to her room. Okay, if you would please go away. I've got work to do. See, I like. Before I could even say anything, the door shut with a loud bang. Shaking my head, I looked at Hein. What time is it? About 12. Hein replied after checking his watch. Looking behind me at Amanda, I asked. Want to go get something to eat? Amanda thought for a moment before she nodded. I then turned to look at Hein. What about you? No, sorry, I can't. Oh? Got something else going? Yeah, I'm supposed to meet with Leopold. Leopold? Never mind, I'd rather not ask. The withdrawal symptoms have been getting more and more severe for Leopold. It had gotten to the point where his face was sunken from sleep deprivation. Should I call Kevin? Lowering my head, I took out my communication device and messaged Kevin. Twang. Twang. It didn't take long for him to reply. Unexpectedly, he also rejected me. Sorry, I can't. I'm busy. Was a bit perplexed by the rejection, but I didn't think too much. Perhaps he was training. Guess he's not available as well. Shrugging my shoulders, I looked at Amanda. Well, guess it's just us two. With her hand on her chin, A complicated look flashed across Donna's brows. What's wrong? Walking beside her was Monica. With her hands behind her head, she had a nonchalant look on her face. Sensing something off about Donna's mood, she asked. Something wrong with you? Donna's footsteps came to a halt. Raising her head, she looked at Monica. Tell me, Monica. That guy from before was someone I know, right? Coming to a stop, Monica's eyes opened up. Putting her arms away from her head, she casually looked around. Am I right? Donna reiterated. Her tone was a lot more serious than before. Subjected to such a tone, Monica hurriedly nodded her head. Yes, you're right. Who is it? It's... Pinching the middle of her brows, Donna raised her hand to block Monica from speaking. Wait, don't tell me. I think I already have an idea. There's only one person that would interact with Melissa and Amanda like that. Moreover, that look. That cold and emotionless look. She thought that she was overthinking things back then, but it finally dawned on her why it looked so familiar. If there was anyone with that look who got along with Melissa and Amanda, who usually never talked with anyone, there could only be one person. Donna lifted her head. Turning her head back in the direction of the dorms, her amethyst-colored eyes shined. Soon a smile appeared on her face as she muttered. I see. No wonder you were reacting like that. Sitting inside of his own room, leaning on a chair with his arms crossed, Kevin stared at the panel in front of him. Warning. 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 The time remnant has set its eyes on you. The more he looked at it, the tighter the frown on his face was. Just what is this? It had been a while since he had seen this, but the sense of foreboding he got from it increased with each passing day. It was as though it was telling him that something bad was about to happen. Kevin had been careful throughout the whole trip in the past few months, but the uneasiness within him only grew as time passed. It had gotten to the point that he was now starting to become paranoid. Twang. Distracting him out of his thoughts was the sound of his communication device vibrating. Lowering his head, he looked at his communication device. It was Ren. Do you want to have lunch with me and Amanda? Staring at the message, Kevin turned his attention back toward the panel in front of him. Of course, he didn't forget to send a message back to Ren. Sorry, I can't. I'm busy. Twang. Once he did, Kevin stood up and walked in circles around the room with a thoughtful look on his face. Synchronization, 27%. This is the only clue I have regarding the time remnant. But how was he supposed to raise the synchronization rate? He tried asking the system, but it completely ignored all of his words. Usually it would give him answers, but this time it just stayed mute. This was another thing that increased the uneasiness in Kevin's mind. He really had a nagging feeling that these synchronization events were really important. No, he knew that they were important. Especially after seeing the message regarding the time remnant. Kevin wasn't someone that liked to leave the problems for later. Ever since the appearance of the message, he had been trying to find a solution to it, but despite all of his attempts, he couldn't find the answer. Wait, what if I used the book? A thought suddenly crossed his mind. That's right, the last time I went through a synchronization event, it was after something happened to Ren and I touched the book, which was called the Time Codex. Kevin's mind started to race. He felt like he was getting closer to the solution. Halting his steps, he placed his arm underneath his chin. Time Codex, Time Remnant. His eyes opened wide. What if this whatever time remnant is not looking for me but the Time Codex? Or... Many ideas started to flash across Kevin's brain as he paced around the room. He was looking for the red book. He had an inkling that perhaps he might find an answer there. Where did I leave it? But as he looked for it in his room, he suddenly noticed that it wasn't supposed to be where he originally thought it was. On his desk. In fact, this had not been the first that this had happened. Sometimes he would find his book a couple of centimeters away from where it was supposed to be, or sometimes it would just fall over. It didn't happen often, maybe once every few months, but now it was completely gone. He never put much thought into it before, since the book was not something others apart from him could see. But now, with the idea of the time remnant flashing across his mind, the uneasiness within him only grew. Where is it? Not here as well? Pacing around the room, he slowly started to panic. Flipping his whole room upside down, Kevin's breathing soon became rough. No, where is it? Scratching the back of his head, he muttered. It's gone. The book was gone. No matter how much he looked, the book was gone. But how? Who could have taken the book? I've already tested it. There is no way anyone can see the book apart from me. Huh. Biting his lips hard, Kevin took a step forward. But it was then that suddenly his vision blurred. His foot stumbled slightly and the energy inside of his body suddenly drained. Before he knew it, the ground neared his vision. Emergency quest. Description. End of proof. 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 Synchronization. +7%. But just as he was about to fall, a panel suddenly popped up in front of him. His mind was growing hazier by the second, but he was able to make out the contents of the panel. Bang. Sadly, he wasn't able to see for too long as his head soon smashed against the ground and his consciousness slipped. Chapter 398, Dream or Reality. Free. I'd like to have this, please. Sitting inside a restaurant, Amanda could hear Ren's voice coming from in front of her. He was currently ordering a meal. Yeah, I want this and this. He pointed at the menu on the table. This one looks interesting too. After ordering a couple more meals, lifting his head, he looked at her. What about you? Did you order already? Amanda nodded her head. She had already ordered beforehand. Unlike him, she only needed one meal to be full. Oh, I see. Ren nodded in understanding. He then turned towards the waitress. I guess that's all. With a simple nod, the elven waitress left. Staring at the back of the waitress, Ren leaned back on his chair. Who would have thought that they had restaurants here too? The place they were currently in was one of the most famous restaurants in Isanor. Ren chose this place. The internal design of the place gave off a calm and tranquil feeling with simple yet elegant designs. Plants appeared all over the place and a wispy scent of lavender lingered in the air. How is Nola doing? Whilst absorbed by the environment, Ren's voice suddenly reached her ears. Turning her head, she answered. She misses you. Amanda proceeded to take a sip of her drink. It was the same honeydew they served back at the hall. Is that so? MHM. She always talks about you. I see, looks like she hasn't forgotten about me. Lifting her head, Amanda could vividly feel the relief in his voice. Nodding her head, she took another sip of her drink. I bring her to the guild from time to time when your parents are at work. At the guild? She likes the place quite a lot. Maxwell, her butler, was especially attached to her. Thinking about it, a smile crept upon her face. You must really like Nola. A smile soon emerged on Ren's face as he looked at her. The smile didn't last for long, however, as he soon lowered his head. How old is she now? It's been a while since I had last seen her. If only. It's okay. Amanda reassured. Pursing her lips, she put her drink down. She wasn't the best person to ask when it came to relationships, but from having interacted with Nola long enough, she knew that Nola did not resent him in any way for not being there. Just make up for it later. Make it up? Spend time with her later. I don't know if I'll have time in the future. Oh. Staring at Ren, an idea suddenly struck Amanda. I can take a video message if you want. A video message? Good idea. Vigor returned on Ren's face. He then turned to look towards his left and right. Where should we take it? Let's take it outside. Amanda suggested. It wasn't really appropriate in here since the guests had to keep a certain volume. Fortunately, Ren seemed to have noticed this as he soon nodded his head. You're right. Let's take it after we eat. Following his words, a calm atmosphere enshrouded their surroundings as neither one of them spoke for the next couple of minutes. Catching a glimpse of Ren, who was sitting opposite of her, Amanda had a complicated look on her face. Apart from the morning training sessions, this may be the first time that they had truly talked to each other alone. Ever since his disappearance, Amanda had a lot of time to reflect on herself. She was currently unsure about her feelings towards him. Back when he first disappeared, she realized she liked him. It was an odd emotion that she had never felt before, but it didn't last long as his death and her work had taken her mind away from such matter. Now that he was back in front of her, Amanda didn't know what she felt about him. Do I like him or do I not? Her mind was conflicted. Being the next-in-line guild master for the #1 guild in the human domain, she had her fair share of suitors. It would be a lie if she said she didn't. They were all handsome and had nice backgrounds, but No matter how many tried to approach her, Amanda could only feel repulsion from them. They may try to hide it, but Amanda could see through their greed. It was clear that they were only after either her beauty or her guild. None of them truly understood her. Let me fix that for you. Distracting Amanda out of her thoughts, Rin suddenly leaned forward and corrected the posture of her utensils. She was so distracted that she had only noticed it now. Better right? He asked with a smile before leaning back on his chair. Staring at the utensils, Amanda lowered her head and softly mumbled, "Thank you." Her heart, which had not once moved, finally skipped a single beat. Not many knew about her small obsessive-compulsive disorder. It was a small disorder that made her obsessed with cleanliness and symmetry. It bugged her whenever she saw something that wasn't positioned properly. And even if they did, no one would go out of their way to help her. At least, not till she met Rin, who did these small gestures from time to time back at the lock. It was perhaps small stuff like this that made Amanda conscious of him. It was as though he knew exactly what she liked and disliked. "Amanda." Ren's voice suddenly sounded. Lifting her head, Amanda looked at him and their eyes met. "Yes. Tell me if I'm not seeing things." Extending his hand, Rin proceeded to point towards the window of the restaurant. Turning her head, Amanda's eyes dulled. Standing outside of the window with her hands cupped together to get a better look at the insides of the restaurant was Emma. Glancing around the place for a brief moment, her eyes soon met with hers and Amanda could vividly see Emma's eyes lit up. Before she could even say anything, Emma entered the restaurant and headed in her direction with a brilliant smile. "Ha, Amanda, fancy seeing you here." Amanda nodded her head. "Am I disturbing?" Emma asked. Lowering her head, her eyes soon paused on Ren. "Are you?" "Yes, it's me," Ren casually answered. "Mind if I join?" "Do as you please." Ren sighed before pointing toward the right side of the table where there was an empty spot. Emma's eyes lit up with glee. "Thanks." She then unceremoniously sat down and called for a waiter. "Excuse me, can I order something?" Emma's loud voice reverberated throughout the whole establishment. Turning her head, Amanda's eyes soon met with Ren's. Then, turning their attention back to Emma as if synchronized, they both sighed at the same time. H.A. Lifting their heads, their eyes once again met and a chuckle escaped from Amanda's lips. "Hee." Ren merely smiled in response. But it was clear to Amanda that he was trying to hold his laugh back. "What's so funny?" Emma's voice suddenly rang. With her head turned and her eyes squinted, she alternated her gaze between Amanda and Ren. "You guys aren't laughing at me, are you?" "No." Turning her head, Amanda feigned ignorance. But of course this didn't go unnoticed by Emma, who eyed her like a hawk. "You're definitely lying. Tell me what you were laughing about." With her head turned, Amanda's mouth remained shut. Regardless of how Emma protested, she just continued to ignore her. "Tisk." This continued for a minute before Emma eventually relented and clicked her tongue. Taking the menu, she proceeded to make her order. Fortunately, for the next hour, no more incidents occurred and they were all able to enjoy a nice meal together. Thigh clank. Returning to my room from lunch, I felt exhausted. The food was good, but it was a lot heavier than I had expected. I still had fun though. Not as much when Emma joined, but it was fun. "I'll get some sleep." Was originally planning to train some more, but I felt extremely lethargic at the moment. Right as I was about to head to bed, my feet came to an abrupt halt and my body froze. What? My eyes locked onto the corner of the room. More precisely on the top of my desk. What is that doing there? I took a step back. Wariness flashed across my body as my eyes locked onto a small red book in the distance. Ever since I was brought to the monolith, I thought that the book had burned into nothingness. Since I couldn't put it in my dimensional space, I thought I had lost it forever, but why is it here? Uneasiness flashed across my eyes. Normally I would have been happy about it, but I wasn't. For it to suddenly appear out of nowhere. Something just wasn't right. I took a deep breath, calming down my nerves. Carefully looking around the room to make sure there wasn't anyone present, I took a step forward. Just in case, I channeled the mana inside of my body, ready to use it at any moment in time. Halting my steps in front of the book, I took another breath. Then, extending my hand forward, I placed my palm on top of the book. Nothing. Once my hand touched the book and nothing happened, my shoulders relaxed a little. Perhaps I'm just overthinking things. Still, that didn't mean that I was less wary of the book. How did it suddenly show up in front of me out of nowhere? Did it just automatically follow me? But why now and not before? There were so many questions I had in my mind, but regardless of how much I thought about them, I couldn't find the answer. In the end, after contemplating on the matter for the next couple of minutes, I finally decided to open the book. I wonder if it still shows me Kevin's point of view. Huh? My hand froze. Flip. Flip. Hold on. Moving my head from left to right, my mouth trembled slightly. Why is there nothing written on it? The book was blank. Completely blank. There was nothing written on it. My eyes opened wide at this realization. Just what in the... Shiraying. A bright light suddenly shot out from the book, enveloping my body completely. Wah. Throwing the book away, I took a couple of steps back, but before I could take even more steps back, the light completely devoured me whole. What came after the light was darkness. I couldn't tell for how long I was out, but for a long time, my body felt numb as a heavy pressure bore down on me from above. It felt as though a truck had been placed on top of me. I really couldn't put it into words, but the sensation never disappeared as I soon regained my consciousness. Abruptly opening my eyes, I sat up straight. Or at least tried to, but the heavy pressure bearing down on me from above prevented me from doing so. I had difficulty breathing and my mind was groggy. A heavy stench of alcohol invaded my nostrils. Ugh. I groaned in pain. It was an indescribable pain. As I was getting choked, I was deprived of oxygen. I couldn't breathe and I couldn't talk. All I could do was struggle. My vision began to turn cloudy. I couldn't feel my limbs. My body felt numb, but I didn't see anything like my life flashing before my eyes. It hurts. I tightly clenched my head as I internally screamed to myself. As I held my head, I felt an odd sensation, but I couldn't quite make out what it was. The pain had overtaken my entire mind. The pain lasted for over a minute before it slowly disappeared. What just happened? Lifting my head up, I tried to make heads or tails about what had just happened, but when I did, my body suddenly froze. What? My heart started to quicken and my already rough breathing started to become even rougher. Impossible, no, it can't be. Lowering my head and staring at my hands, horror struck me. My heart sank to its lowest levels. Why am I back? Chapter 399, Pure Evil. This can't be. I took deep breaths trying to calm my mind. But it was all for naught as I struggled to breathe properly. I was suffocating. I took a couple more breaths in hopes of trying to calm myself down. Fortunately, this time it worked as my nerves quickly calmed. Get it together. Closing my eyes and taking another deep breath, I muttered inside of my mind. Status. Nothing. My heart rate quickened. Status. I muttered once again. Nothing. Biting my lips, I tried channeling my mana. Perhaps this might work. And nothing. Anxiety suddenly struck me as my toes curled inwardly. My teeth started to chatter and my eyes darted all over the room. I was inside of a single-bedroom apartment. It was a familiar place. One that I remember seeing in my memories and living in for over 32 years of my life. A place that I thought I would never get to see again. My stomach churned. It can't be. My head was numb. Lowering my head and staring at my hands, the truth finally dawned on me. I was back in my own world. No. I repeatedly muttered inside of my mind. Denial. I was in complete denial. It couldn't be. How could I have possibly come back here? Was everything I went through a lie? Was everything really just a sick dream? Impossible. I shouted at the top of my lungs. There was simply no way. Everything felt so clear. No one way did I want to believe that everything I had been through was a dream. Wait, what if this is all an illusion? Now that I thought about it, all of this happened as soon as I touched the red book. What if this scenario was merely an illusion I was trapped in? Yes, it had to be that. I deluded myself. There must be something more about this situation than I'm making out. Staring at my desk in the distance, hope rekindled in my eyes. I tried to sit up straight, but... Breathing heavily, I stared at the white ceiling of the room. Fuck, I forgot just how fat I was. Rolling around the ground, using my hands, struggling with all my might, I was eventually able to help myself up. But as I stood up, I noticed that almost all of my energy was gone. A nauseating feeling coursed through my head as I had to lean onto the side of the wall in order to keep my balance. It took me a while to regain my energy. Once I felt comfortable enough to once again move, I headed for my desk. Thump, thump, thump. A low thump sounded as my feet touched the ground. Trying my best to ignore it, I soon arrived before my desk. Moving the chair back, I sat on it. Crick. A familiar creaking sound reverberated throughout the room as soon as I sat on the chair. Ignoring it, I slowly opened my laptop and checked the date. My hand, which was holding onto the mouse, paused. Shock dyed my face. 2 days. Only 2 days have passed since I died? This makes even less sense. The experiences I went through amounted to at least 3 years of my life. You're telling me that everything I went through I experienced in just 2 days? Bullshit. Fick. Pressing onto the mouse, I moved the cursor around the screen and opened my novel page. == The Luminescent Swordman. == Fick. == Chapter 399. Preparations before the final battle, 3. Chapter 400. The Final Battle, 1. == It's the same as I remember. Those were indeed the last 2 chapters one uploaded before dying. Fick. Moving the cursor, I pressed onto the chapter and checked the comments. Good Guy 85. Author, I have a question. How come the Demon King is trying to consume Earth? You said it was because it would help him break through the limit, but why? Is he just trying to conquer the whole universe? Roman, the more I read the more confused I am. Ugh, I can't wait for this to finish so that I can finally understand why Kevin acted so out of character in the previous chapter. EB. I feel like there's something missing about this story. It's as though there should be something else. Some of the interactions and behaviors don't make sense. Alexei. Upload faster, take my money. I've got plenty of it. Crocs. Thanks for the chapter. Alexei, I was first. Crocs, no me. Weeboo, why no chapter? It's been 2 days. == Ha. Covering my head with my hands, I leaned back on my chair. What is happening? Everything was the same as it was in the past. Nothing changed. It truly did look as though I was back in my own world. But, the anxiety that I had been suppressing inside of me suddenly once again erupted out me as my stomach churned. My teeth chattered and my leg tapped onto the ground repeatedly. No, this can't be happening. I refused to believe it. No. You'll be fine. It was then that a voice suddenly rang from the corner of the room. Who? My head snapped towards my right side. Towards where the voice came from. Wok T. My eyes opened wide and my body froze. From the corner of the room, with an innocent smile on his face, a figure slowly appeared in my vision. Jet black hair, ocean blue eyes, it was a familiar figure. He was someone that I knew all too well by now. Of course, how couldn't I know him? Rin. He was none other than the person I transmigrated into. The real Rindover. In the vast and limitless expanse of mist and debris, the smell of blood lingered in the air as a powerful pressure bore down on the world from above. Torn houses and dead bodies littered the whole world as the color red dyed the atmosphere. Boom. With a loud explosion, one of the buildings suddenly collapsed. Emma. What followed after was a panicked voice as a black figure rushed down. But before he could arrive at the building, a voice suddenly sounded inside of the black figure's ears. Leave her be. The voice was deep and devoid of any emotions. Shut up. The black figure shouted. This obviously did not sit well with the voice inside of his ear as it coldly rebutted. What are you doing? You think she's more important than what we're doing? Despite the voice in his ears, the black figure promptly ignored the voice as it continued to dash towards the direction of where Emma crashed. Fucking useless. The other voice once coldly said. Anger could vividly be felt in his voice as he spoke his words. What the fuck are you doing? Ignore her. She's baggage. What's more important is defeating the Demon King. Despite the voice's words, the black figure continued to ignore it and searched for Emma amidst the rubble. Kevin. The voice inside of his ears sounded again. Kevin tapped onto his ear and shut off the communication devices in his ear. Emma. Kevin desperately searched through the rubble. His face was pale and his eyes darting all over the place. Ugh. Suddenly Kevin heard a faint groan coming from his right side. It was faint, but with his superhuman hearing he was able to hear it. His eyes instantly lit up. Emma. Moving through the debris, Kevin soon saw a hand sticking out and he immediately reached for it. Clasping the hand, he waved his hand, and all the debris around him pulverized, revealing a beautiful figure. Kevin's face died with joy once he saw Emma again, but that joy did not last for long. With hazy eyes, Emma stared at the sky. Blood seeped from the side of her face. Her hair was disheveled and deep cuts appeared all over her figure. She was in a terrible state. Sensing something, Emma's eyes rippled slightly. "Hey, Kevin, is that you?" Her voice was faint. So faint that it sounded like a mosquito buzz. Of course, this was no problem for Kevin as he leaned his head forward and weakly nodded his head. Yes, it's me. I see." Emma smiled. It was a weak smile, but there was a look of relief in it. Kevin's heart sank when he saw this. "You're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I'm here." Holding her into his arms, Kevin quickly reassured her. "Here, drink this." He quickly fed her a potion. Feeding the potion to her was quite a struggle as she was barely holding on to her consciousness, but he eventually managed to give her the whole drink. Once Kevin fed her the potion, Emma's injuries started to heal at a visible rate. Relief appeared on Kevin's face once he saw this. Huh. But that relief did not last for long as Emma's eyes suddenly sprung open widely. Ugh. Emma's body suddenly started to convulse. Foam escaped from her mouth as her body trembled uncontrollably. Emma? Emma? Emma. Panic struck Kevin as he held her in his arms. What happened? I'm sure I fed her the right potion? How come her condition worsened? Taking another potion from his dimensional space, Kevin forcefully fed it to her, but it was all to no avail as her body continued to tremble. With her eyes wide open, staring at the sky, Emma's body continued to shake. With each passing second, her condition seemed to worsen. Biting her lips, Kevin tapped onto the communication device in his ear. Just hold on, Emma. Oh. But before he could even speak, with a weak sound, Emma's body suddenly stopped shaking. Kevin's face bleached. Extending his hand with a trembling finger, he tried to feel her pulse. No. So. Don't leave me, no. Please. Despite his many attempts at trying to feel her pulse, he felt nothing. She was dead. Tears streamed down the side of his face as his body limped. He suddenly felt as though all the energy inside of his body had been drained from out of his body. The world suddenly became gray. It can't be. No. Why? With Emma in his arms, pain flashed across his face as his body trembled uncontrollably. Then, raising his head and staring at the sky towards the red mass in the far distance, Kevin screamed at the top of his lungs. Hiya! His desperate and pained cry resounded through the whole world. Inside of a tent not far from where Kevin was, a male stared at the panel displaying the battle that was ensuing. His eyes were devoid of any emotions. In fact, there was deep ruthlessness hidden within them. Staring at Kevin, who was mourning Emma's death, the male did not feel anything. Rather, there was a trace of disgust on his face. Tapping onto his right ear to cut off the communication device, he took his eyes away from the screen. How useless. His emotionless voice rang through the room. You had one job and one job only. Defeat the Demon King, yet you let such emotions sway you. How many times does this make it? Deep disappointment flashed across his eyes as he stared at a small flask in his hand. It was a flask similar to the one that Kevin had fed Emma. I wouldn't have had to resort to this if you hadn't been so compassionate. I hope her death can finally set your mind straight. Putting the flask away, the male turned his attention back to the screen. No matter how important of a piece you are, a piece should act as a piece should act. Lifting his head, the male sat down on a large chair and propped his face up with his arm. I hope this will finally clear your head. Chapter 400, Pure Evil. Thigh clank. I know a nice place. Closing the door behind me, I followed Rin out of my apartment. After taking a look at our surroundings, we decided to move to a better place to talk. Simply put, my apartment was too filthy to stay in. Just the stench of alcohol alone was enough to make the both of us want to leave. As I followed Rin from behind, there were many questions that I wanted to ask him, such as what was he doing here? And why was he in my apartment? But more than anything else, I finally felt calm. Ren's presence and existence gave me a sense of calmness. If he was here, it meant that everything that had happened to me wasn't merely some kind of dream. I wasn't in a coma and I really did reincarnate back into that world. It's real. What I went through wasn't the fruition of my imagination. Knowing this, I was able to recompose himself. After parting ways with each other, darkness completely overtook my consciousness. I thought that I was finally gone for good, but before I knew it, I found myself in this world. Walking around the streets, Ren's voice reached my ears. It wasn't even for that long. Probably a day and a half. Just when I thought I would never associate myself with my old life, you suddenly showed up. I honestly didn't expect to see you so soon. My brows slowly knit together. Probably a day and a half. Didn't expect to see you so soon. Indeed, if I wasn't wrong, only 2 days had passed since I had died in this world. Just like the other Ren said, the time he had been here only amounted to around a day and a half. At first I was a bit confused about this world. As in, everything looks a lot less advanced than I previously remembered. There were no air trains, no holographic devices or anything remotely close to that kind of level of technology. Ren's feet came to an abrupt halt. There also isn't any mana in this world. His brows were knit into a tight frown. Taking another step forward, Ren continued. At first I was very scared. Scared about the idea of coming into a world that I had never been in. But thinking about the fact that my family was fine, and that they were in your hands, I felt somewhat reassured. Stopping in front of a cafe shop, Ren entered the place. I followed behind him. He then proceeded to order a coffee and I did the same. I was familiar with the place we were in. I remembered coming here a couple of times back in the past. It wasn't bad. As I was saying, just when I had come to terms with this world, you suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Raising and lowering his head, Ren's eyes passed on me before he squinted. After a while, seemingly having made up his mind, he suddenly asked, "Is that how you looked before coming to my world?" My mouth twitched at his question. Eventually I nodded. "Yeah. I see." Ren took a sip of his coffee before his brows suddenly furrowed. "Strange," he softly muttered. Hearing his words, my head tilted. What's so strange about me looking like this? Yes, I was fat. Very fat if I had to put it bluntly, but was it really so strange? Well, perhaps it was, since he would have never have thought that the guy who took over his body was someone like me. Oh. Ren covered his hand with his mouth before waving them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the fact that you are fat is strange. I'm just more concerned about other things. The frown on my face deepened. What are you talking about? Ren put his cup down. His face turned solemn. I don't know. It's just that I find this place weird. Weird. Looking around the place, I found nothing strange. Everything was just as I remembered in my memories. The view, the smell, the people, and the atmosphere. There was nothing strange about what I was seeing. What was so strange about this place? It was then that a thought suddenly struck me and a look of understanding flashed across my face. Ah, right. He could be referring to the fact that he was not used to modern technology. A feint hung on my lips as I tried to reassure Ren, but before I could finish my sentence, he promptly cut me off. My face froze as a result. I get what you mean, don't worry about it. Everything is the same as No, not that. What do you mean? Biting the tip of his finger, Ren tapped the table with his other hand. For the next couple of seconds he didn't say anything. He was just blankly staring at the distance. Do you perhaps have your ID on you? He suddenly asked. My head tilted back in bafflement. My ID? Why are you asking me about my ID? Was he perhaps trying to pretend to be me? Indeed, he was a nobody in this world, but that wouldn't really work. We looked completely different. Do you have it or not? Ren's impatient voice reached my ears. Yeah. I was a bit taken aback by his impatientness, but I still complied. Reaching out from my pocket, I took out my wallet and took out my ID card. Here. I then slid it over to Ren, who took it and analyzed it. A deep silence enveloped us as Ren carefully analyzed the card in his hand. It wasn't long before he was done looking at it. As I expected, he put the card back down on the table. What did you find? I asked out of curiosity. Ren pointed at my ID. His expression was extremely serious. Have a look at it yourself. Tilting my head, I lowered my head and stared at my ID card. I don't see anything wrong with I. My mouth froze. Extending my hand forward, I slid the card before me. Lowering my head, I took a closer look at my ID card. What's going on? Shock clouded my face as I stared at my card. Lifting my head, I looked at Ren. Where is my name? There was a picture of me, my address, date of birth, and all the stuff that an ID card had, yet there was no picture of me. Wait a minute. Something isn't right. I scratched the back of my head. What was my name again? What? Leaning forward, I massaged my head. Even after returning, I couldn't remember my real name. And now even my own ID card did not have my own name? Something wasn't right. Just what in the world is going on? Ren, can I call you that? The other Ren carefully asked. Staring at him once again, I nodded. Yeah. I was now used to being called that. The other Ren nodded before he leaned back on his chair. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Go ahead. Do you remember the faces of your parents? The faces of my parents? I closed my eyes and tried to remember. Why can't I remember the faces of my parents? My breathing started to become rougher. You can't remember? Ren's voice reached my ears. With my head still lowered, I shook it. Okay, let me ask you another question. What was the name of the university you wanted to enter? My eyes lit up. This answer I knew. Lifting my head, I confidently said. University A. University A? Ren repeated. Lowering his head and eyeing me from the top of his eyes, he had a questioning look on his face. Are you sure? Yeah. I nodded confidently. This answer I did not forget. How could I forget my dream university? Ren. A troubled look appeared on the other Ren's face. My brows furrowed after seeing his face. Was there something wrong with my answer? I didn't think so. Meeting his eyes, I asked. Is there something wrong with my answer? Ren scratched the side of his head. How should I say this, but is there really a university called University A? Does such a name really make sense to you? Yeah, I'm pretty Sue. Pursing my lips, my voice slowly became fainter. The previous confidence I had slowly started to dissipate. Doubt started to creep into my body as my mouth opened and closed multiple times. University A, that is indeed the place I wanted to go to. Meeting the other Ren's eyes, the anxiety within me only grew. There was something seriously wrong with the situation. Whew. I had to take a deep breath to calm myself down. Of course, that was of no help as the weird sensation in my chest never disappeared. Raising my right hand, I started to bite on my nails. Ren, who was sitting opposite me, remained quiet throughout the whole time. He had a pensive look on his face. With his legs crossed, his left arm tapped onto the table. Then raising his head, he asked. From what you've told me, it looks like there is something really messed up about your memories before entering the novel. As though someone tried to purposely Mani. A thought suddenly struck me as I cut the other Ren off. Wait, how do you know that the world you came from is a novel? Also, how come your questions are right on the spot? How could he have possibly known about this? Only I know the password of my laptop. I stood up. Is there something that you're not telling me? Silence enveloped our area as Ren and I stared at each other. Then lowering his head and staring at his watch, Ren muttered. Looks like we won't have time to continue our chat. My head leaned back in bewilderment. What AR? Shua. Before I could even finish my sentence, a similar bright light to before suddenly enveloped my whole body and I felt my existence completely disappear like that. Staring at Ren's figure slowly getting enveloped in light, the other Ren remained seated on his chair. He watched as Ren disappeared in front of his eyes. As he watched, his previous innocent facade slowly started to crumble apart and what replaced it was a cold and indifferent look. Prick, prick, prick. Cracks started to form around the world before it completely shattered apart like glass. Crash. What came after was an unending darkness. Thip, thip, thip. Standing up, Ren slowly walked amidst the darkness. It wasn't long before his feet came to a pause. Raising his head, Ren came face to face with a white orb with black threads revolving around it. At the moment the black threads were trying to entrap the white orb, but despite its many efforts, the black threads were slowly starting to get pushed back. Staring at the orb with an indifferent look, Ren blinked slowly. Looks like this one might also be a failure. He silently muttered. Closing his eyes and extending his hand, he placed the palm of his hand on the white orb. I have to give you credit for being able to escape my influence. Ren slowly lifted his head. But don't think for a moment that this is it. Suddenly, his face twisted as the black threads around the orb danced wildly, trying their best to entrap the orb. Yet it was still to no avail. Realizing that the threads couldn't do anything to the orb, Ren's face returned to its emotionless one. All the pieces have been set into motion long ago. Don't think for a second that you have escaped me. I will always be here. His cold words spread throughout the empty space. Then taking his hand away from the orb, darkness completely enveloped his body. His deep blue eyes shone amidst the darkness. Before his figure completely disappeared, opening his mouth, he spoke a couple more words. Kevin. Drifting in the void, his words soon disappeared alongside his body as darkness completely took over the world. Don't think for a second that this is over.